The new story starts with the lady of the palace, who started to say to herself every day at night, "I decided never to do anything like this again." But suddenly her servant Lan came and knocked on her door saying, "Ma'am." And here, when she opened the door and saw him, she said to herself, "But when my eyes fell on him, everything collapsed." And here she felt ashamed, and he entered her room and she did with him what she decided not to do. And she says to herself, "I am overwhelmed because I forced him to be mine. But it's not easy to put it under my grip. And kissing someone undesirable, and sleeping with someone undesirable. Although it may seem like a trivial game." Then she put her hands on his face as she continued and said to herself, "Please don't leave me. Without you, I will lose everything. Keep going." There was no other alternative. Do it. Do it for me. Come on, feel my body. I'm sorry I love you, Lan. And he came back and did that to her, so she started saying to herself, "I can feel it. The warmth and fragrance of your body, and these feelings that are no longer strange. But I enjoy every second of it." And when he turned his face away, she started saying to herself, "Face, I want to see him. I want to watch his reddish face as he sleeps next to me. But it doesn't end here. Inside this palace, no one has any affection for me." She managed to survive, despite the cruelty she was subjected to. In the middle of all this stands Lan, and bearing the brunt of my frustrations, I blind myself to the fact that Lan has feelings for someone else, and I'm aware of everything. However, it kindles my insatiable desire. Disturbed in his quiet nights, then, I forced him into my bed against his will. He surrendered to me with his body by force, having no other choice. At the crack of dawn, the sins I ignored come back to haunt me or swallow me completely, and I feel guilty for reaching out to him and paralyzes me with his increasing weight. Perhaps, like any human being, I struggle with feelings of empathy. I constantly strive to hide my weaknesses, but I always fail when faced with other people's gaze. Why am I the one crying? Isn't Lan supposed to cry? Suddenly Lan wiped her tears and said, "Madam, why tears?" Then he picked it up and said, "Does that give you a lot of satisfaction? To cry in front of your servant? You act like a seductive, ma'am." And here we will know the story from its origin in Login. The capital of Siena lies north of Transta and extends further northwest. This area is surrounded by arid lands and rugged mountains. Arid expanses interspersed with deep valleys and hills. The population here depends on raising livestock and extracting resources. Despite the difficulties, a cove provides a harbor for transporting minerals from nearby areas. The Viscount Login, the Viscount Loit. He diligently oversees the port of Minwad, a center of thriving trade. Despite facing adversity in his youth, living a simple and modest life, he rose to a prestigious position in Nangalo. Despite amassing considerable wealth for his region, the Viscount faces a very difficult situation, as there is no clear heir to inherit his legacy. This absence is intentional and is a reflection of his refusal to recognize an alternative. The reason behind this decision is very personal and somewhat embarrassing for him. This stems from his daughter's illness and disordered behavior. Their fragile health is a constant threat, further complicating the question of who will continue their legacy. And here, when I woke up, I asked the maid, and she said, "Where did you hide it?" But the maid said, "What do you mean, ma'am?" So she told her, "Lan. Where's Lan?" And here the maid said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't understand what you mean." And this maid is called Maid Ivana Els. And here she felt upset when she told her, "Stop lying. You're definitely hiding Lan from me, aren't you?" "Lan?" Then in anger she said, "Do you find this entertaining?" And the maid quietly said, "Indeed, no, ma'am." But she screamed and said, "You must think I'm kidding, right? It's not just you. Everyone in this palace seems to think so." And here the servants heard her voice. At the time, Ivana started to say to herself, "Today, looks like she has nothing to throw at me." And here she said, I was the last one to see him before. You think I don't know you took it? But the maid Ivana said I didn't do anything in ma'am's room. Didn't the lady herself say that she did not like me to enter her room? But she screamed at her and said, "Stop lying to me. Do you think I don't know?" And here the maid Ivana said to her to comfort her, "Well, if these are my lady's beliefs, what can I do?" But I went to her and grabbed her hair and started beating her, and she is the maid Ivana saying at the same time to herself, "How long will I endure the jealousy of this?" Hands without strength drew my hair, and that weak breath, and traces on her neck. A tense look, and a face full of anxiety. Even after you hit me with the... And here I pushed her away from her and fell to the ground from her weakness. And she is the maid looking at her and continuing and saying to herself, "Usually I would ignore," but her hand was so disgusting that I couldn't touch her, and she was going to shout at her, but suddenly the maids arrived and they were saying, "What is going on?" I heard screams from Mrs. Ellis's room. "Madam, sorry, we're going to your room." And when they entered into a daze, they said, "Oh my God, Mrs. Elise," and Ivana. And suddenly one of them said, "Don't let male servants in." And here I asked one of them, and she said, "Ivana, are you okay?" And Ivana said yes. And at the same time she says to herself, "This way, people will surely think that Mrs. Elise did something disgraceful to me." And here one of them said, "Does Mrs. Elise bother you again?" And that's where Elise said, "You." And another sympathized with Ivana and said, "What a poor Ivana." And here Ivana said to herself, "In the end, she is just a loser who does not dare to respond in front of many people." And here the maid started saying, "Ivana, are you okay? At this rate, what if Ivana quits her job?" And here Ivana was saying to herself, "Yes, that's the solution. Keep her trapped." And here I looked at her while she was smiling at the time when the maid said, "Don't say bad things like that." If it is not Ivana, who will handle Ms. Elise? At this time, Elise tried to cover herself up as she said to herself, "Me. That's not what I meant." And here, Ivana continued saying to herself, "In this way, no one will respect you and will not sympathize with you in this palace." But she was shocked when Lan came in and said, "I hear you're looking for me, lady." And he's Elise's servant named Lan. And that's where he entered. Lan hurried and took the cover and covered it. At this time, Ivana was looking at them and saying to herself, "This face again." Although she is the one looking for Lan, when she meets him, her face is clearly nervous. And that's where Elise said to Lan, "I didn't." And Ivana kept saying to herself, I don't know how long ago she was always afraid when she faced Lan. Suddenly Lan shouted at the maids and said, "Stop looking." And here Ivana said to herself, "That's face was always like that when you dealt with Lan." And here he told them, "Get out, everyone." And they did that. And the door was closed in their face, so they started saying, "What's wrong with it? Isn't he a servant too? So why does he order us? It's like..." But having her by her side reassures Mrs. Elizabeth and makes her feel calm. And here the maid fell silent. And at night Ivana entered Elizabeth's room, and here Lan said to her, "I told you not to come in here." And here she told him, "Yes, I'm sorry, but you won't go out. It's almost time." And here he kissed sleeping Elizabeth on her forehead, and then said, "Fair enough." And here she brought his shirt, and she says, "Your clothes fell to the floor." And he took it from her while he was saying, "Inform." Then he looked at her while saying to himself, "Wounds on her face did Elizabeth do it." And here he wears his shirt, and she says to herself, "You are right. He's the one who doesn't have feelings." Since then, his expression has never changed. He has always remained constant. Control personal desires. He has been taught not to show facial expressions. Even the wounds on my face couldn't move his heart. However, I hope that it will continue like this and not change. And here I looked at her angrily while she was sleeping, and she was saying, "However, she..." And that's when Lan told her, "If you don't want Elizabeth to hit you, stay away from her." And here she bowed to him, saying, "Fair enough. I'll get out of sight of her, Your Highness." And here it's clear he's not just a servant, as Elizabeth thinks. Young king of Travasta, Cybele III. He was the legitimate son of King Petri V and Queen Bonarit. And after the death of his father during the Aden War, he took over the Supreme Council, which was already considered the Night of the Storm and Thunder, and the Supreme Council, which was already considered the Night of the Storm and Thunder, crowned king at the age of 6, and it became the glory of Travasta. However, those who coveted the power of the young king began to crawl out of the shadows, and the Duke of Joseph Christ, the advisor who helped the caliph to the throne, get angry and try to eliminate these would-be greedy. But he died suddenly one day for unknown reasons. And here appeared half of the late king's brother, who did not even have the right to the throne because he was born illegitimate. That was Vilvan, Duke of Aspargul, and he started a rebellion on a stormy night. The young king was forced for the first time in his life to take off his crown and wear public clothes and escape to the outskirts of Travasta. And here Ivana said in anger, "How dare that lowly, illegitimate son?" And here someone told her, "Please calm down, Madam Lena." And here we will know that her real name is Lena. And here she said, "How can you ask me to calm down now, Sir Oscar? That illegitimate son already had more luxury than he deserved, so how dare he do this? And this is Prince Lan." And suddenly someone came and said, "An urgent message has been received. We received information that Vilvan's research team had already arrived in the area. I'm sure they're looking for you, Your Majesty, but we're already at the limits of Travasta. Where can we go from here?" And here, Lena started to say, in tension, "We have to firm our feet, come hell or high water." But Lan told her no, we must leave this place immediately. And indeed they both left on a horse, and they went to the castle where they became servants. And here, she started to say to Lena in herself, "I was so scared that I couldn't close my eyelids. And if we continue to run away like this, we may end up being captured and slaughtered. How did this happen to me?" King Sybil, in the heart of the night. When calm reigned, the king looked from the top of the castle. Without any hesitation, he was calm and confident. As if he owns the whole world in his hands, he was still the glory of the kingdom and its protector. And I was sure that my king would not leave like this. And she started looking at him while she was continuing and saying he was fiery and solar, and I was ready to give everything I had for him, and that was the oath I swore. It's what kept me alive for the past 13 years. And here I remembered her saying, "But that, whenever my king is with her these days," he really looked like a cheap person, as if he was no longer the same. And suddenly one of the maids called her and told her, "What are you doing, Ivana? Let's roll." But when the other maid said, "Leave the miserable young girl to that dirty," so Ivana slapped her and then said to her, "What are you doing? Don't you dare to talk about Lan like that in front of me again." And here the maid apologized and said, "I am sorry." And here Ivana said to herself, "Doesn't matter, I was planning to eliminate all the bastards who mocked my king the moment he regained his throne. Whether they are servants or even nobles, their fate was one. Anyone who dares to say a single word against my king will be beheaded. Then I will hang their heads outside the royal castle with the head of that bastard Philiphon." Whenever I imagined that, I couldn't hold back my smile. So she told them, "Let's go back," and she says to herself at the same time. It wasn't long until that day, and here the scene changes when Lan says to Elizabeth, "Do you have a hobby of making a scene while you are naked?" And here she said, "Wah, but..." I woke up and she wasn't here. And that's when Lan told her, "You're about to get married. If rumors spread about a man frequenting your bedroom, your father's reputation will take a severe hit." But Elizabeth said to him, This is not something to worry about." Then in sadness, she started to say to herself, "He talks about my marriage carelessly. If I were in his place, I would have gone mad of jealousy. Or maybe it was expected since Lan didn't like it." And here Lan woke her up from her talk to herself and said, "Where did you go? The butler, bitchin', ordered me to go help the new plaster. And here she told him, "Why are you doing this?" And here he told her, "As I just said, I ordered it." But Elizabeth said, "Well, don't do it from now on. Don't listen to anyone else's commands. You are my servant." And that's when Lan told her, "In that case, ma'am, would you like me to serve you only at night?" And the bell rang as he continued and said, "If so, I will ask Viscount Root permission to make it happen for you." But she told him, "I wait." Then she continued and said to herself while holding his hands, "Just me. I just don't want you to ruin your hands." And here the maid came and said, "Did you invite me, ma'am?" Lan said, "Bring me a basin of water and a towel to wash the lady." And here he started wiping her foot as she looked at him and said to herself, "Sometimes Lan acts kind to me, and that was enough. To give the wrong impression that I might be able to become his lover, I couldn't let him go, although it was not mine once. And so I ruined it." And here Lan finished cleaning her foot, so he said, "Everything is done. You can apply the ointment yourself." And he was going to leave, but she grabbed his shirt and said, "I wait in here and here. You haven't completely cleaned me up yet." And this is what made him look at her in silence, and then he carried her while saying, "Then excuse me," and put it on his feet. And he started cleaning it at the time. She was saying to herself, it was forcing a man to sleep with a woman he didn't want. Disgusting. So it was perfectly understandable that Lan would look at me coldly. And here he asked her and said, "Does it hurt?" While she was shy, she said, "No, it doesn't hurt." But at the same time, she said to herself, "I'm lying. But if I tell him the truth, Lan will use it as an excuse not to sleep with me." And here he started cleaning the rest of her body while she was continuing and saying to herself, Lan was already enduring the agony of making love with me every night. But it no longer matters whether he wants it or not. A broken relationship cannot be repaired at all, and Lan will never love me. And here, when he finished cleaning her, he stood up and said, "I have cleaned your whole body. Are you satisfied now?" At that time she said to herself, "And so I would have acted shamelessly again and communicated with him." And here, before he left, she told him, "You have to come to me again tonight. Make love to me again tonight." Then she said to herself, "And tomorrow night, and the night after that as well." And here Lan left the hospital saying, "I will see now." And here she looked at her and said to herself, "Until his scent becomes permanently saturated with me." And here, when the doctor examined her, he said, "Well, it's the same as before, and this is not good. You were able to stay alive for a long time, so I thought you would improve at least a little. But it is still unlikely that you will live a long life." And here, when he told her, "At this rate, I'm not sure if you'll even be able to bear a child," she became angry and grabbed his hair furiously, saying, "What?" And here, the maids pulled her away while she was screaming at him, saying, "What did you just say? You are a nasty old man." And here the maid said to her, "Madam, please calm down." And here the doctor said, "She really does have such a terrible temper." And before he left, he said, "I still heard that your marriage has finally been arranged, so that is very reassuring. It will give you the best chance to produce an heir." And here, she said to him, "You vile man, get the hell out of here."